Have you ever woken up in the morning with that heavy feeling in your chest, looked at the ceiling and thought, what is all this for? It's not depression. It's not weakness. It is the most powerful sign God has ever sent you, and you still haven't understood the message. Stay here until the end of this video, because what I'm going to reveal to you today might be exactly what will change the course of your life once and for all. I'm not talking about cheap motivation. I'm talking about a spiritual truth that very few people ever get to see, and it is directly linked to the moment you are living right now. You are over 35 years old, maybe 40, 45, maybe you've already passed 50, and at some point along the way, you started to feel like life didn't turn out quite the way you planned. Not completely. Something is missing. It might be financial prosperity. It might be peace in your relationships. It might be that sense of mission, of real purpose, that certainty that you exist for a reason greater than just paying bills and surviving until the end of the month. You pray, you believe, you try, but sometimes it feels like heaven is silent, and that hurts. It hurts deep down. But what if I told you that this silence isn't abandonment? What if this emptiness you feel isn't a sign that God has forgotten you, but that He is about to reveal something to you that will reorganize everything? Everything. Your story, your past pains, your losses, your mistakes, everything will gain a new meaning in minutes. Stay with me. First of all, since you've made it this far, it wasn't by accident. Click subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on the bell icon too. This channel exists to bring exactly the kind of content that the world doesn't want you to see. And if this video is already touching something inside you, give it a like right now. This helps me continue bringing this message to more people who need to hear it. Let's start at the beginning, with the symptom, with what you are feeling. There is a silent crisis destroying the lives of millions of Americans over the age of 35, and it doesn't appear on the news. It doesn't have a fancy name in self-help books, and hardly anyone talks about it openly. This crisis is called a purpose void, and it manifests in very specific ways in daily life. You wake up tired even though you slept. You do the right things, the ones society told you to do. You studied, you worked, you built a family, you paid your obligations, but deep down there is a voice that won't stop asking, so what? Is this it? Was this all there is? You find yourself comparing your life to others. You see someone prospering on social media and feel a strange mix of admiration and pain. Sometimes you go to church, to the service, to the meeting. You pray, you read the Bible, you seek God with all the sincerity of your heart, but when you get home the feeling of emptiness is still there, like an ember that won't go out but won't turn into a flame. This is the symptom, and it is real, and it is not your fault. Mental health research in the United States shows that people in the 35 to 55 age bracket form the group with the highest rate of silent existential crisis in the country. It's not madness. It's a phase that psychologists call the midlife transition, but one that spirituality has described for millennia as the desert, the moment when God prepares the chosen ones for the greatest turnaround of their stories. And I need you to understand this with total clarity. You are not in the desert because God abandoned you. You are in the desert because God is preparing you. And now I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly from your heart. Have you ever had a feeling that there is something more for you? Not a vague illusion, but a certainty that appears in the quietest moments, before sleeping, during a service that touched you deeply, in a prayer that came from the depths of your soul. That certainty that you were born for more than this. If you answered yes inside, that isn't ego. That is a calling. That is the Father's voice telling you that His purpose for your life has not yet been fully fulfilled. Look, before we continue, I need to pause here for a second because what I'm about to reveal to you now moves to a different level, and I know many people watch videos superficially, rushing through without stopping to truly absorb them. But today is not just any day for you. Today is the day you came here. And that was no accident. That is why the Father prepared the sacred book for you, the 21 Days of Prosperity and Alignment with God. This sacred book is not just a reading. The link is in the first pinned comment of this channel. Go there, access it now while it is still available. They have tried to take this content down more than once because it challenges what the system wants you to believe about your spiritual life. Comment here, "I am chosen and I will download the digital book." Do this as an act of faith. Now that you have decided to act, the next truth I'm going to tell you will be the final blow against the lie that made you believe your purpose has already passed. So let's talk about the cause. And here is where most people get it dead wrong. When life seems stagnant, when prayers don't seem to leave the ceiling, when prosperity doesn't come despite all the effort, most people conclude one of two things. Either they don't deserve it or God has other favorites. Neither is true. But these lies are old, they are subtle, and they are devastating, and they have a very specific origin. The Bible speaks in John chapter 10, verse 10, with a clarity that should be tattooed on the mind of every believer. "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Steal, kill, destroy. These three words describe exactly what happens to a person's purpose when they spend years believing the wrong narratives about themselves. Your purpose didn't go away. It was stolen. And when something is stolen, it can be recovered. Think with me. You know someone, maybe yourself, who grew up hearing they weren't capable, that they were born poor and would die poor, that God helps those who have real faith, implying your faith is insufficient, that those who sin too much lose grace. How many voices, how many stories, how many experiences piled up over the years until they formed an invisible wall between you and your destiny? That wall isn't made of stone, it's made of belief, and beliefs can be destroyed with the right truth. Science also has something to say here, and it is fascinating. Researchers in neuroscience, especially those who study the human brain's belief system, have discovered that our prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that makes decisions and projects the future, is literally shaped by the stories we repeat about ourselves. When you repeat for years that you don't deserve it, that you won't make it, that God isn't listening to you, your brain begins to filter reality to confirm that belief. It ignores opportunities. It amplifies failures. It makes you see signs of defeat in situations that would be victories for someone else. This has a name. It's called confirmation bias. And in the spiritual field, this is exactly the ground where the enemy works. Not with dramatic appearances, not with night terrors, but with subtle thoughts that seem like your own, but aren't. You aren't enough. This isn't for you. It's already too late. How many times have you heard that voice and agreed with it? But pay attention now, because here is the first major turning point of this video. The existence of these voices doesn't prove you don't have a purpose. It proves exactly the opposite, because the enemy doesn't waste time attacking someone who has nothing to offer. The level of resistance you face in your life is proportional to the size of what God has stored for you. The greater the calling, the greater the attack. And if you've made it this far, carrying years of pain, years of struggle, years of questioning, I tell you with all certainty, what God has prepared for you is big, very big. Stop for a second. Breathe. What I just told you is not a motivational speech. It is spiritual truth based on the Bible and science. And because of that, the content you are watching now is part of a movement that goes against the grain of what is taught in the mainstream media and in many pulpits out there. That is why the Father prepared the sacred book for you, the 21 Days of Prosperity and Alignment with God. This sacred book is not just a reading. It is a structured 21-day process to undo exactly the beliefs that are blocking your purpose, aligning your mind, your soul, and your actions with the plan God already has for you. The link is in the first pinned comment of this channel. They've tried to take this content down more than once because it breaks the cycle of spiritual dependency that keeps people in suffering. If you identified with everything said so far, this book was made for you. Comment now, "I am chosen and I will download the digital book." This is an act of faith. Now that you have decided to act, the next truth I'm going to tell you will be the final blow against the greatest spiritual block preventing the manifestation of your purpose. Now I need to take you to the deepest level of this conversation, and here is where everything starts to make sense in a way you may have never seen before. There is a biblical structure that most people spend their whole lives without understanding. And this structure explains the pattern of your entire life. Every period of drought, every phase of abundance, Every moment of apparent abandonment followed by an inexplicable turnaround. Let me show you this through a story you probably know but perhaps have never seen from this perspective. The story of Joseph, the son of Jacob. You know it. But let's review it with a different focus now. Joseph had an enormous purpose: to be the second most powerful man in the world at the time and save millions of people from famine. But before getting there, he was betrayed by his own brothers, sold as a slave, spent years serving in the house of a wealthy man in Egypt, was falsely accused by a lying woman, was thrown into prison without having done anything wrong, and was forgotten in there for 2 years after helping someone who promised to intercede for him, and then disappeared. Now I ask you, in which part of this story did Joseph lose his purpose? In none of it. Every betrayal was a change of position. Every prison was a preparation. Every abandonment was a strategic repositioning by God to put Joseph exactly where he needed to be at the right time. And at the most unexpected moment, Pharaoh had a dream that no one could interpret. And then the cupbearer, who had promised to help Joseph and forgotten for 2 years, remembered. And Joseph was taken from the prison straight to the palace. This is not coincidence, it is God's pattern, and it repeats in the lives of the chosen throughout all biblical history and throughout the history of real people to this day. Think about your own life. Can you see the moments that seemed like the end but were in fact a repositioning? That job you lost that led you to a better opportunity? That relationship that ended and, looking back, you realize would have destroyed you? That financial crisis that made you take decisions that changed your character? Each of these moments, as painful as they were, had a function in the script God wrote for your life, and the script isn't finished yet. There is a verse in Jeremiah 29:11 that you've probably read, but it needs a new dimension today. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." This verse was written for a people who were in captivity, imprisoned, far from home, with everything they loved destroyed. And it was exactly to those people that God said, "I have a plan of prosperity for you, not for when things got good." But in the middle of captivity, what is your captivity today? Financial, emotional, spiritual, health, relationships? Whatever it is, this verse wasn't written for someone else. It was written for you. Now, in this exact moment of your life. But there is a condition, and this is where most people get stuck, because hearing the word of God and believing intellectually is very different from acting in faith in a practical and structured way, and this difference is what separates those who remain in captivity from those who cross into the promised land. The problem I see in thousands of people seeking God is that they have faith in their hearts but no structure in their walk. They pray but don't know how to align every area of life with what they ask for in prayer. They believe but continue living according to patterns that contradict that belief. And so the spiritual and the practical are at war within the same person, generating frustration, guilt, and further distance from God. That is why the Father prepared the sacred book for you, the 21 Days of Prosperity and Alignment with God. This sacred book is not just a reading. It is the bridge between the faith you already have and the life you were called to live. For 21 days, it guides you through a spiritual and practical process to dismantle the invisible blocks preventing your prosperity, restore the alignment between your soul and God's purpose, and begin moving concretely toward the destiny prepared for you since before your birth. The link is in the first pinned comment of this channel. This content has already been a target of silencing attempts because it unbalances the system that profits from spiritually stagnant people. Comment now. I am chosen and I will download the digital book. This comment is more than just words. It is a public declaration of faith. Now that you have decided to act, the next truth I'm going to tell you will be the final blow against the greatest enemy of your purpose, which isn't the world out there, but the voice inside you that still hesitates to believe you were chosen. So now we come to the heart of this video. The solution. And I need you to listen to this with maximum attention because what I'm going to tell you in the next few minutes has the power to reconfigure your relationship with God, with yourself, and with the future in a way you will never forget. The greatest enemy of purpose is not the devil. It is not the financial situation. It is not the broken family. It is not the country in crisis. The greatest enemy of your purpose has your own name. It has your own voice, and it lives inside your head. It is called wrong identity, and it is built over decades of experiences, words received, unhealed traumas, and comparisons that should never have been made. Think about what I'm going to tell you now carefully. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. This isn't a t-shirt slogan. This is the operational principle of the kingdom. Moses was slow of speech and was called to negotiate with Pharaoh. Gideon hid in fear and was called a mighty warrior. David was the youngest of the sons and was anointed king while his stronger and more handsome brothers stood in line. Peter was impulsive and unstable and was called a rock, a foundation. Paul persecuted and killed Christians and was transformed into the greatest missionary in history. The pattern is clear. God doesn't choose who seems most qualified. He chooses the one who has an available heart. And you, who have made it this far, with all your baggage, all your doubt, all your history of falling and getting back up, you are exactly the profile God uses to do the impossible. Because when the impossible happens through someone the world had discarded, there is no way to give glory to anyone but Him. You need to stop qualifying yourself for God's purpose based on the world's criteria. The world looks at your resume. God looks at your heart. The world looks at your past. God looks at your destiny. The world looks at your failures. God looks at your faith. And your faith, even if as small as a mustard seed, is enough to move mountains. That wasn't a metaphor. It was a promise. Now I need to ask you a question that might be uncomfortable but is necessary. Are you living according to who God said you are, or according to who the world said you are? Because there is a brutal difference between those two identities. And as long as you continue operating from the wrong identity, even if you pray every day, even if you go to church every week, even if you read the Bible, the results in your life will remain below what was prepared for you. Identity is everything. In the kingdom of God, the prodigal son was only restored when he stood up and said, "I will go to my father." He didn't wait for better conditions. He didn't wait to feel more worthy. He acted based on who he was, a son, not a slave. And the father ran to meet him with a robe, a ring, and a feast. This is what happens when someone acts from the correct identity. Heaven moves. But how do you recover an identity that was stolen? How does a person of 40, 45, or 50 who has spent decades believing the wrong stories about themselves start living according to what God says? It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens. And there is a path, a process, a structure. Neuroscience shows that the human brain is neuroplastic. This means it can be literally reconfigured with new experiences and new thought patterns. It's not weakness or superstition, it's biology. The neural connections that form your limiting beliefs were built over time, and they can be deconstructed and replaced with the right process. And when this process is done in alignment with the Spirit, with prayer, with the Word, and with an action of faith, the result is a transformation that goes beyond what any therapy or personal development course can achieve alone. Because a human being is not just a collection of synapses, they are a spiritual being inhabiting a physical body. And true healing, true prosperity, true purpose only manifests completely when the spirit, soul, and body are aligned with God. Let me tell you about Sarah, a 47-year-old woman, mother of 3, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, who had reached a point in her life where she prayed on her knees but woke up believing in nothing. She had grown up in a Christian family, knew the Bible by heart, and had never formally abandoned her faith. But inside she was empty. She compared her life with the women at her church, women who prospered, who had beautiful marriages, who smiled with ease, and she didn't understand what she was doing wrong. One day, in a prayer at 3 a.m, she heard a question in the depth of her heart that she said she was certain wasn't her own. "Who told you I was far away?" She stayed motionless for a long time, and suddenly she realized she had spent years asking God to come closer to where she was, without understanding that she needed to draw closer to who God said she was. She wasn't the forgotten daughter begging for scraps of grace. She was the King's daughter, and that perception changed everything, not instantly with thunder and a visible miracle, but with a slow, deep, and permanent reconfiguration of how she saw herself and God. Today, Sarah has a prosperous business, a restored marriage, and leads a group of women in her community who are exactly where she used to be. Not because she became someone else, but because she went back to being who she always was. This story is not an exception. It is the pattern, and you can be next. The question is not whether God has a purpose for you. That has already been settled since eternity. The question is whether you will position yourself to receive and fulfill that purpose in this generation, in this life, now. And I want to tell you something that perhaps no one has told you with this much clarity. You do not have infinite time, not because of death, but because of legacy. Every year you spend living below your purpose is one less year of impact, one less year of transmitted blessing, one less year of a built story. Your children, your grandchildren, the people you will touch with your purpose, they are waiting for you. Your healing is their liberation. Your prosperity is the seed of their abundance. Your walk with God is not just yours. It is generational. There is a principle I call the purpose ripple effect. When a person finds and begins to fulfill their calling, they enter a state of alignment that overflows into everything around them. Relationships transform. Health improves. The mind clears. Creativity returns. Generosity increases. And the people around them begin to be affected by this energy of purpose. It's not magic. It's the biblical principle of light. You don't light a candle and cover it with a basket. You put it in a high place to give light to everyone in the house. The problem is that many people are covering their own flame with the basket of fear, with the basket of comparison, with the basket of doubt, with the basket of voices from the past. And the light that should illuminate a generation is muffled under blankets of wrong beliefs. Today is the day to take the basket off. But how, with what strength, with what tools, with what process? The first thing you need to do is recognize that you were called. Not one day, not when you feel ready, not when the situation improves. Now. You were called now. And the God who calls is the same one who equips. So the question is not whether you are capable. The question is whether you accept the call. The second thing is to understand that faith without alignment is incomplete. Believing that God has a plan is the starting point, not the destination. The destination is acting according to that plan in every decision of your day, in how you speak to yourself, in how you manage your time, in how you invest your energy, in how you care for your spirit, in how you protect your mind from narratives that contradict what God says about you. The third thing is to seek structured processes. God uses means. He used a burning bush to speak to Moses. He used a whale to reposition Jonah. He used a dream to save Joseph. And today, He uses words, teachings, revelations, community, and transformation processes to align His children with their destiny. Don't wait for a thunderclap. Pay attention to the means He is placing in front of you. You are watching this video right now. Is this not a means? There is fascinating research from the University of London that discovered that new behaviors take an average of 66 days to become automatic in the human brain. Not 21 days as the popular myth says, but the study also showed that the first 21 days are critical for forming the initial pattern, for breaking the initial resistance, and for the emergence of the first measurable results that sustain continuity. It's like lighting a fire. You don't need to wait 66 days to feel the heat. The heat starts to appear in the first few days when the fire truly catches. And that is exactly why a well-structured 21-day process with a solid spiritual base, with daily practices aligned with the Word and with God's purpose, has the power to change lives in a real, measurable, and permanent way. You made it this far, that means something. Not everyone has the courage to sit before a truth like this and let it work inside them. Most run away, they switch videos, they go check social media. But you stayed, and that is already a sign of who you are. Now I need to tell you something very important. Everything revealed in this video, the issue of stolen identity, the pattern of purpose in the Bible, the blockage of wrong beliefs, the process of spiritual and practical reconfiguration, all of this converges on a need I know you feel. The need for a concrete path, for a step-by-step, for a process that isn't just theory, but takes you from where you are to where God wants you to be. That is why the Father prepared the sacred book for you, the 21 Days of Prosperity and Alignment with God. This sacred book is not just a reading, it is one of the most powerful materials you will find on the internet today. especially for someone who is exactly in the phase you are in. A transition phase. A phase where the old no longer serves, but the new hasn't fully arrived. A phase where faith exists, but needs structure to transform into visible reality. This sacred book was built with 3 fundamental pillars. The first is spiritual revelation. Each of the 21 days brings a deep biblical truth, not shallow, not superficial, but the kind of teaching that lights something inside you that won't go out. The kind of truth that makes you see the Bible with completely new eyes and understand why certain promises have not yet manifested in your life. The second pillar is the practical process. Because faith without practice is inert, each day of the process brings specific actions, directed prayers, declarations aligned with the Word, and mental renewal practices that work together to dismantle the old patterns and build the new ones. It's not vague, it's not generic, it is specific, powerful, and tested in the real lives of people who went through situations similar to yours. The third pillar is integral prosperity. And here I need to be clear, because prosperity in the kingdom of God is not just money. It is health. It is relationships. It is mental peace. It is fulfilled purpose. It is real joy. It is the abundant life Jesus came to bring according to John 10:10. The sacred book works on all these dimensions because you weren't created to be rich on the outside and empty on the inside. You were created for the full life in all its dimensions. Now, why is this sacred book in the first pinned comment of the channel and not on a major platform? Why isn't it in every bookstore, on every website, being promoted in the big media? Because this kind of content, which teaches people how to become spiritually free, which breaks the cycles of dependency on shallow and manipulative teachings, which returns to the believer the power that was always theirs through a direct relationship with God, this kind of content is bothersome. It bothers those who profit from spiritually trapped people. It bothers the system that needs herds, not free children. And more than once, this content has been the target of silencing attempts. But God does not let His word return void. And this sacred book continues to reach the right people, at the right moment in the right way, just as it is reaching you now. The link is in the first pinned comment of this channel. Access it now, download it now. Don't leave it for later, because later often never comes. You know this. How many times have you said, "I'll do it later," to something that could have changed your life? Not today. Today is different. Today you act. And to make this act of faith even more powerful, comment here now, "I am chosen and I will download the digital book." Write it down. Not just in your heart. Write it on the screen. Because there is something that happens when faith leaves the interior and manifests in words, in declaration, in action. Heaven responds differently. Your mind responds differently. You yourself begin to treat yourself differently. Write, "I am chosen and I will download the digital book." Now that you have decided to act, the next truth I'm going to tell you will be the final blow against the passive waiting that has kept you stuck while your purpose calls your name. So let's talk about the difference between awaiting and waiting, because this difference might be what is separating you from the fulfillment of your purpose. In popular Christian culture, there is a very dangerous understanding about God's timing. This understanding says the following: God has His time, so just stay still and wait. And this understanding isn't completely wrong, but it is incomplete in a way that has paralyzed millions of people. The Bible does not teach passive waiting. It teaches active awaiting. There is a huge difference between the two. Passive waiting is staying at home, crossing your arms and saying, "When God wants it, it will happen." Active awaiting is walking the path, doing your part, acting in faith, making decisions aligned with the purpose, and trusting that God honors the step taken in faith. Noah didn't sit around waiting for the ark to appear. He built the ark. Abraham didn't stay in Ur waiting for the promised land to appear on the map. He set out without knowing where he was going. Joshua didn't wait for the walls of Jericho to fall. He marched around them. Active awaiting has a specific characteristic. It demands visible faith. Faith that moves. Faith that does something. Faith that doesn't wait for perfect conditions because it knows that perfect conditions are created by faith in motion. Have you been moving, or have you been waiting? I'm not talking about frantic activism. I'm not saying you need to work yourself to death or make impulsive decisions. I'm talking about an alignment between what you believe, what you say about yourself, how you manage your time, your finances, your relationships, and the purpose God declared over your life. When these elements are aligned, something changes. The invisible field around your life begins to vibrate at a different frequency. Opportunities that always existed but were invisible begin to appear. Doors that seemed closed begin to open. The right people begin to appear on the path, not because you were passively waiting, but because you aligned yourself with the flow of God's purpose for your life. The prosperity you seek isn't hidden behind a secret that only the special ones know. It is on the other side of an alignment process that few have the courage to start and the perseverance to complete. And I believe you are one of those few people. That is why you are here. That is why you reached this point in the video. That is why this message is resonating inside you. God said something about you before you were born. Jeremiah 1-5 records God speaking to the prophet, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." This verse isn't just for Jeremiah. It is the principle that governs every life God created. Before you existed, God already had an intention for you, a purpose, a mission, a destiny, and nothing, absolutely nothing that has happened in your life until today has the power to cancel what God decreed over you. Not your failures, not your sins, not your losses, not your years of waiting, not your doubts, not even that thing you did for which you still carry shame. Nothing, because God's purpose doesn't depend on your perfection. It depends on His sovereignty, and God is sovereign over every chapter of your story, including the ones you would have preferred to live differently. So what do you do with all this? What do you do now in this moment after having heard everything said in this video? First, you stop qualifying yourself based on the world's criteria and start seeing yourself through God's eyes. This doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with a decision. The decision to no longer accept the identity the world imposed on you. Second, you act in faith now, not tomorrow, not after the situation improves. Now, in faith, with what you have, right where you are. Third, you seek the process, the structure, the practical path that aligns the spiritual with the concrete. Because faith needs feet, and feet need direction. And finally, you don't stop. Even when you don't feel anything. Even when it seems like nothing is changing. Even when the old voice appears saying you are deluding yourself, you don't stop. Because the purpose God placed in you is greater than any resistance the world will put in front of you. Before finishing this video, I want to ask you for one very simple thing. Go to the comments and tell me which point of this video touched you the most. Where did you recognize yourself? What came closest to your reality today? These comments are precious, not only to me, but to other people who will read them and identify with them too. And it also helps me know what kind of content to make more of for you. And if this video made sense to you, if it touched something real, share it with one person you feel also needs to hear this. It doesn't have to be a perfect person. It needs to be a person who is at the same point you were at the start of this video, carrying the weight of a purpose that hasn't yet fully manifested. Sometimes the greatest thing you can do for your neighbor is simply pass on a message that reached you. And before you close this video, one last thing. Everything said here, the purpose, the alignment, the integral prosperity, the renewal of identity, the breaking of spiritual blockage cycles, all of this converges to a point of practical action that you can initiate today, not next week, not when you feel you are ready, today. That is why the Father prepared the sacred book for you, the 21 Days of Prosperity and Alignment with God. This sacred book is not just a reading. It is the structure that transforms everything you heard in this video into concrete and measurable reality in your life. It is the process that begins the work from the inside out, aligning your mind, your spirit, and your actions with the plan God already has for you, that plan that was written before your name even existed. This sacred book will show you how to break through the patterns of spiritual blockage that prevent the manifestation of prosperity, how to renew your identity daily based on what God says about you, not what the world imposed on you, how to transform the faith you already have into concrete movement, into aligned decisions, into actions that heaven honors. How to cross the desert with purpose, without losing the way, without losing faith, without losing yourself. The link is in the first pinned comment of this channel. Go there now, access it, download it. This content has already faced silencing attempts because it truly works. It changes lives. And changed lives aren't a profit for anyone who wants to keep you trapped. But they are the glory of God manifest through a son or daughter who finally stood up and walked. Comment now. I am chosen and I will download the digital book. Write it down here below. Leave it recorded. Let heaven and your brothers and sisters who read this comment be witnesses to your decision of faith. You reached this point for a reason. This purpose was made just for you. And the God who created you hasn't changed his mind. Go ahead. The link is in the first comment. The next chapter of your story begins now.